friends, thanks for joining me for another episode of Rebranding God. You might be listening to this episode, or if you want to watch this video, just head to my YouTube channel where it's being recorded. So I'm here today to speak about trauma. Why do we need to revisit the past? Or better question is, do we need to keep revisiting, delving to the past to heal trauma? I'm going to be answering this question, and I also want to be addressing why some people are getting so tired of hearing this word trauma. They think it's over discussed. It's a topic now in many podcasts, in many YouTube videos, many books. And I'm going to say that I'm very glad this conversation is getting louder and louder, because everything we see today, from our own personal stress, from stress in our relationships, to the war that is happening in the other side of the world right now, because I'm in the United States, everything is a byproduct of trauma. And if we want to create a better world for the children — I don't have children, and yet I want to create a better world for the children coming — we need to resolve this trauma inside of us. So the people who are complaining about they're tired of listening too much about trauma, there's two things happening there. One, many people don't want to face their own trauma, their own past experiences. And some people, they are talking about that because they're seeing some of their friends, family members going to therapy, hiring a coach, and yet they're not making any changes in their life. So there's validation to this conversation. Like anything can have what I call the pendulum effect, can go too far. Some people can spend way too much time ruminating in their trauma in the past without making any changes in the present moment. That's why in my work, it's a combination of processing the past, processing those unresolved emotions, limiting beliefs of the past, and yet giving my clients strategies to rewire, to repattern the bodies and the brain. So we need both approaches. We can't just have one. So I'm gonna start this conversation by answering this question. Why do we need to go back to the past? If the only thing that matters is really the now, as many spiritual teachers talk about, not just spiritual teachers like Eckhart Tolle, who wrote a great book, The Power of Now, but also physics, quantum physics tells us that there's no such a thing as time, that the only thing that exists is the now. Life happens in the now, in the present moment. And time is a concept that is man-made. So if spiritual teachers, scientists are agreeing that there's only now, I think it's a very valid question, relevant question to ask. Why do we need to keep going back to the past in order to free ourselves? If freedom, joy, love, beauty, peace are really our natural states, why are we not living in love, joy, freedom, beauty? Instead, we live with anxiety, depression, overwhelm, and other forms of stress. So that's what I'm here for, to explore this with you and hopefully bring some insights that will help you to understand why some people are ruminating too much in the past, why some people are healing versus other people are not healing, and why this conversation is relevant. So I'm going to start by answering this question reading the master, Eckhart Tolle. Somebody in one of his workshops asked why you need to go back to the past, or if it's necessary to go back to the past to heal if there's only the now. And this is his answer that I thought was brilliant. There is no need to investigate the unconscious past in you, except as it manifests at this moment as a thought, an emotion, a desire, a reaction, or an external event that happens to you. Whatever you need to know about the unconscious past in you, the challenge of the present moment will bring it out. If you delve into the past, it will become a bottomless pit. There will always be more. I want to emphasize the word accept. There's no need to investigate the unconscious past in you. Accept as it manifests in this present moment. And that's what skilled therapists, skilled coaches work with. That's what I work with my clients. I am not interested in having big conversations about the past. And yet, the patterns of the past, the unresolved, the traumas of the past keep showing up in the present moment in order to be resolved. But also they keep showing up as a form of a charged memory. There's something very alive inside the body that keeps showing up in the present moment, and that's the energy. There's an emotion that is very alive in our bodies that is charged. That's what an emotion is. Emotion is basically a memory that is still holding a charge. That's energy, and the energy keeps showing up in our present moment in the shape of unhealthy habits, patterns, addictions. So unhealthy habits, patterns, addictions, ruminating to problems. And if we investigate where all those energies are coming from, they're usually coming from a moment in the past. That's the only reason we explore the past. That's why I recommend anybody in this journey of healing to be working with somebody, a therapist or coach, who practices a somatic model of therapy. Because these memories are stored in the body, not in the brain. In the brain, in the intellect, we can keep talking about the experience of the past, but we don't heal in the brain. That's why many forms of therapies are failing people, and many more therapists are seeking deeper somatic models to help their clients. So I practice something called compassion inquiry. I never share what I really practice, but that's what I practice. A modality called compassion inquiry, which was created by Dr. Gabor Mate, a very famous doctor in trauma who has helped thousands and thousands of people. He has trained many coaches and therapists to practice this modality, and I have to say it changed my life, it changed my practice as a coach, and it's changing the life of many of my clients. It's a very powerful modality that basically sees what's happening in the present moment, and by using a process that takes us to our bodies, it traces us back to the moment in time where there's an imprint, when there's a frozen emotion that got stuck in the body. What's this frozen emotion? Let me just, with your permission, to go a little bit into the biology of trauma. The frozen emotion happened in a moment where, as a child, we experienced some very strong, intense emotion of anger, sadness, rage, grief, and we're not able to process those emotions. One, because they were too intense for the body of a child. Two, because most of us didn't have an available, self-regulated, mature parent to hold us and help us to process and discharge the emotion. So a lot of us were actually discouraged to express those emotions. We were punished, or were penalized, or some people even abused for expressing those emotions. So many of us in very early age learn how to hold those emotions inside us and suppress, and it gets suppressed into our unconscious mind. So those moments where we had an experience, and some people call small t trauma or big T trauma, I'm just going to use the word trauma overall. Anytime a child experienced an intense emotion and the child wasn't able to discharge that with a regulated, mature, emotion available adult, that emotion got trapped in the body. Think of a snapshot, a snapshot. That moment there's a picture taking of that intense emotion, and it got stuck in the body. So those emotions get frozen. So think of our bodies having hundreds, maybe thousands of those teeny imprints or snapshots or unfrozen parts, like a cube of dry ice that is there. And the energy of that frozen emotion keeps affecting our present moment. So what healing is Healing is basically a process of tracing back, finding that point of that was frozen, and discharging that emotion, discharging that anger, that sadness, that grief, that rage in the present moment. So as the emotion is released, is discharged, then we are left just with the memory. We are left just with the wisdom of that moment, and the energy of that event no longer affects our present moment, because everything is energy. It's the energy of that moment that keeps affecting our present moment. So again, in the process with the skill therapists and coaches, we are able to help people to release that charge of the moment in time that could have happened when you were 1 year old, 5 years old, 15 years old, or maybe even a year ago. So that's how the healing process happened. The healing is basically, the purpose of healing is to help us to remove these blocks, to start thawing these frozen parts of us that keep affecting us in the present moment and feeding or unhealthy patterns, behaviors, and keep us in this addiction, because it can be a form of addiction. The rumination, the same emotional charges and patterns, it's a form of addiction. So that's one part that I want to get into it. That's one of the reasons why we need to go back to the past to resolve what keeps showing up in your present moment. And a lot of therapy models are failing now because they just doing what's called talk therapy. A talk therapy, even though there's always talking, of course, even a somatic process will be some talking, but the form of talking is very, very different. Talk therapy, traditional talk therapy, helps us to understand where our patterns come from, help us to have intellectual knowledge or even the science to understand, just like I share with you now, I share some of the biology, the knowledge of trauma and why it gets trapped into the body. So that knowledge is important for anybody to know before we go into a somatic process. It's important to understand the why we do certain things. That's why education is a big part of my work with my clients. Understanding why we do this somatic process and why we need to feel those emotions of the past. So to clarify the healing process, we just need to feel the emotions. We don't need to relive the past. We don't even need to have a memory. In fact, I personally don't have memories of my past. Pretty much from the moment I was born to 6, 7 years old, I don't have any memory. I know what happened overall, but I don't have memories. And that's because many of us dissociate from the present moment. And that dissociation is a protective mechanism that as children, our brain develops, dissociate from the present moment to protect us from experiencing too much stress and too much trauma, because a child can't really survive in an environment that's too stressful. So we develop coping strategies or defensive mechanisms that really help us in our childhood, but they don't help us when we're adults. And that's one thing, as coaches and therapists, we help a lot of people to address those protective mechanisms that served in childhood, even saved the life of a child in childhood, but no longer serves in the present moment. So you see that the message that I'm trying to get across here in this solo podcast is that the only reason we do this work, that we revisit our past, is to resolve the stressors, is to resolve these patterns in the present moment that are preventing us from living our essence. What is our essence? Our nature. Our nature is to live in a state of joy, love, beauty, freedom, creativity. That's the nature of the heart. That's the nature of the soul. That's what we're here for. And another purpose of healing is simply to remove all these obstacles that come from the past, so we can live more in our natural states, or we call live in our hearts. Live where our soul is guiding us, our heart is guiding us, and not the mind, the egoic mind because the problem with the mind is very limited. The mind, which is think of the mind as a combination of or history or emotions, all the imprints and traumas that happened with us in the past. So the mind is a record of the past. So the mind is just bringing these thoughts, these emotions, these patterns of the past. So it's very limited. So in order to access or higher mind or higher consciousness, if you will, we need to go beyond the limited mind. And in order to do that, we need to start strengthening or finding, even for some people, the witness, the observer inside us, or what some spiritual teachers call the place of awareness. Is the place that is, Michael Singer will call that place where it's behind all, is the observer behind all, that is watching the thoughts, that is watching the emotions, that's watching the patterns. But in that state in their awareness, it's simply the I am. There's nothing defined. It's simply I am. I am pure awareness. I am pure consciousness. So I'm not gonna get too deep into spirituality here, because I wanted this video or episode to be very practical for you. So I'm gonna go back to Eckhart Tolle to make another point here with you. He talks about that the more attention you give to the past, the more you energize it, and the more likely you are to make a self out of it. Attention is essential, but not to the past as past. So what he's talking about here is the power of our attention. There's the quote, energy flows where attention goes. So he's saying here, don't pay attention to the past. And this is one of the reasons many people do years of therapy and they don't change. They put in too much attention in the past. And that's the problem of talk therapy. It's too much attention in the past without really paying attention to what's going on in the present moment. And paying attention to what's happening in the present moment can't just be an intellectual process. It has to be a somatic, a body process, because again, healing happens in the body. Healing happens as we find the emotion that keeps charging or current patterns, habits, actions, behaviors. So we need to feel. We need to feel the emotion. So when we put our attention in number one, naming what's happening in the present moment. Let's say what's happening in the present moment. You say, I'm paralyzed with fear every day. I want to work on my goals. I want to work on my vision, but I just feel this paralysis and I just keep procrastinating, which is something that a lot of my clients experience. And honestly, it's something that I used to experience a lot. And I can still experience bits of that. I just get myself out of that space very quickly now because of my awareness. I'm aware when it's there. But let's say that's a pattern that you experience constantly, paralysis and procrastination. If you came to see me or you work with an experienced somatic therapist, I would not just be talking over and over and over about that paralysis and procrastination, because I wouldn't be able to resolve that with you in an intellectual level. If just working intellectual level helped us to heal, everybody would be healed. Many people are reading books, many people are going to seminars, many people are listening to podcasts, watching the YouTube videos. There's so much information. And yet, the minority of people consuming this information is really healing. Why? Because we need to be willing to feel the emotions, and it's something that a lot of people don't want to do it. That's why they get tired of this conversation about trauma, because they don't believe they need to feel those emotions. Truly, they're scared because they think if they feel those emotions, they're going to relive the past. So, attention. We need to put attention, number one, what's happening in the present moment. Acknowledge that. And then go into the body. And as you go into the body, we ask, what is the emotion that comes when you are in this pattern of paralysis and procrastination? And usually what I get from myself or my clients, it's this perception, number one, of self-doubt. Because self-doubt, insecurity, it's always behind procrastination. And there are perceptions. It's not a feeling. And then we can go a little deeper. When we have the perception of self-doubt, insecurity, inadequacy is another perception. What is the feeling in the body? And usually the feeling under those perceptions, it's fear. And then when you start finding that fear, where that fear is in the body, we keep going deeper and can find the root of that fear. And when we do that, we find that frozen part of us, something that happened in the past, or maybe microaggressions, micro traumas happened in the past that formed this energy inside our bodies named fear. And inside the energy, there's also this information of all the limitations, the limiting beliefs and limiting decisions that we have made in the moment of the past. When again, there's that snapshot of that trauma, and we made a decision at that moment. A decision was made, maybe a common decision that a lot of people make is, I'm never gonna ask for help. I'm not gonna depend on anybody ever. I'm gonna do everything alone, because when I ask for help and I need somebody to help me, I always get disappointed, and that hurt becomes the imprint. And that shows up in the present as a different pattern. In a lot of relationships, for example, this pattern of not trusting, not asking for help, comes from that place where there's a lot of hurt in the past with our mothers or our fathers, where we adopted this limiting belief that I'm not going to trust anybody, because if I do, I get disappointed. So in this process of thawing these frozen parts inside us, in healing, we are simply left with a memory. And I think it was Dr. Joe Dispenza that says, a memory without a charge or the emotion becomes wisdom. And that's what we take with us to the present moment. So don't delve into the past unless there's a purpose. Don't ruminate to the past unless there's a reason. And the only reason to revisit the past is to explore, is to be curious about what's happening in your present moment. So in this process, I always invite the qualities of curiosity. When you have a pattern that keeps repeating over and over and over, can you be curious about? Instead of judging, instead of shaming, because the more we judge, the more we shame a pattern inside us, the bigger it's going to get. Think of this. Do you think it's wise to discipline a child or a co-worker with judgment and shame? And most people say, no, that doesn't work. And yet, that's exactly the language that most people are using towards the self. Judgment, guilt, shame. And we can heal from that place. So this invites the next quality, after curiosity, the quality of compassion. We need to have compassion in this process. So when you bring curiosity and compassion, it sounds like this. I have this pattern of procrastination. I'm curious what is underneath this pattern. I'm curious what parts of me are maybe experiencing insecurity, anxiety, self-doubt. And I'm going to learn from those parts. That is the language of compassion. Not the language that sound like this. What's wrong with me? I keep procrastinating. I'm lazy. I'm not motivated. I'm a loser. Well, that language is not compassion at all. It's a language of insulting, of abuse. So bringing self-compassion to this journey is essential. And then the third quality that I'm going to bring here is connection. So you became curious about what's causing procrastination. You bring compassion by bringing a loving language to that process. And then you connect with your body and you just sit and explore where the fear, where the insecurity is coming from. And it's a process that usually most people need to learn with a coach like myself or a skill therapist. Again, somebody who practices somatic models that can walk you through this process and take you to the body so you explore. This is a process I use with myself every single day. It's a process that my teacher, because I have a therapist teacher that helps me in this journey because I have blind spots like anybody, is a process she used with myself. In fact, a lot of what I learned was from her. And then the process called Compassion Inquiry, which is the process I use with all my clients. So I'm gonna close this episode with one more reference of Eckhart Tolle. And again, if you're wondering where I'm getting this reference from, it's from the book I read every year, The Power of Now. It's one of the most powerful books. Eckhart Tolle says, what is essential is your conscious presence. That dissolves the past. That is the transformative agent. So don't seek to understand the past, but be as present as you can. The past cannot survive in your presence. It can only survive in your absence. I just think these last words are so powerful that I'm going to say them again. The past cannot survive in your presence. It can only survive in your absence. The past can only survive in your absence. The past, in other words, can only survive in your unconscious. And by doing this work, by showing up every day in presence, you are bringing things out of the unconscious to the conscious. That's basically what I do with every single client. That's why in a lot of my sessions, I sit like a clean slate with no agenda. And I let whatever is happening in the present moment for my clients, and then their bodies inform me everything I need to know. The bodies, my client's body informs her everything she needs to know. And the moment that the information gets dislodged from the unconscious becomes conscious, then we work with that. And going back to the beginning of this video, what I say, we heal the past, we do this healing, this deep healing work, and also we need strategies of how to rewire our brains, how to repattern our nervous system. Because if for 30, 40, 50, even 60 years, we being wired the same way, we have these patterns of the nervous system, we do this emotional release, that a lot of my clients do the emotional release, sitting right here where I am right now, they do this emotional release, but then we need a new program to go into the body. That's where integration comes in. That's when rewiring the brain with new patterns come in, patterns that are growth promoting, health promoting, life affirmative promoting, not patterns of fear or self-doubt or insecurity that are not thriving, promoting at all. They keep us in survival. So to close this conversation today, especially for those people who is still questioning if we need to go back to the past in order to heal, why this conversation of trauma needs to be so big right now. Well, like anything, it's not one size fits all. Just healing the past without having a new model to replace doesn't work. That's why in my practice, in my coaching practice, the way I work with my clients is always about finding the root problem, the root issue, which is usually in the past, releasing that, and then with my client, I create new models, new strategies, new patterns, new habits, new behaviors, so my client can live in the state of thriving, no more survival. We need to get out of survival. And survival is the past. When we're in survival, we keep flip-flopping. We ping-pong between the past and the future. In the past, we ruminate all the things that went wrong. And we go to the future with this hope that the future is going to save us. And none of those aspects will help. Now the past and the future, that's why the now is where we need to be. So in a way, I take these spiritual teachings and hopefully I make into practical strategies for my clients, my audience. So I hope this conversation helped you to understand, number one, why the conversation of trauma is important. Because if we keep living in the past, we keep living in survival, we keep living in trauma, and trauma will keep creating more trauma. Trauma in our bodies, trauma in our relationships, and the end result of this, the extreme of course, is this war that we're watching happening right now, is all the result of unresolved trauma in the bodies and most people living in survival. So why we need to do this healing? Because when I heal, I encourage, I inspire others to heal. And when more of us heal, more of us live in a state of love, of joy, of beauty, which is our nature. Our nature is not anxiety, it's not depression, it's not overwhelm, it's not fear. Like the A Course in Miracles state, we either at every moment living in a state of fear or love. So I invite you here to choose to be aware, to be present, to be in the now, so you have the power to choose to live in love and not to live in fear. Because if we're not conscious in the now, our past programs or past conditioning takes over us, and then we're back into survival. And in survival, we can't thrive. In survival, we become very selfish, very self-centered. We don't want to connect. We don't want to grow. We don't want to heal. Think about it. In survival, it's not time to heal. In survival, the brain acts like it's the body and the brain act like they're running from a lion. And when you're running from a lion, it's just not a good time to connect and to heal or to be curious or to be compassionate. So what I ask you, if you want to start this practice today, because this involves daily practices to even train us to learn how to be present. Adopt a practice, and the first practice is to breathe slowly, to take deep breaths, to slow yourself down. It's only by slowing down that we have the ability to become present. It's only by slowing down. Slowing down is a superpower. You slow down, you become present, and in that presence, you notice what your thoughts are, what your emotions are, what your behaviors are. And in that place, that reference point of the present moment, in the present moment lies the power, the potential to change, to transform, and to heal. Thank you so much. If you're curious about this work, check many more of my videos on YouTube channel. If you want to have a free call, a free consultation, 20-minute consultation, just send me a message. My contact information is under this video, also in the show notes if you're listening to this podcast. And if you want to explore how to heal, how to let go old patterns and create new patterns, let's have a consultation. I would love to explore this journey with you. For now, many blessings. If you like this episode, please share with your friends. Give us a 5-star review on the Rebranding God podcast. And for now, many blessings. Thank you so much.